Hello and welcome back to another sewing tutorial with the Essentials Club. If you're new around here, I am Maddie and today we are going to be making a dream dress of mine. It is the one that I am currently wearing. It has a drawstring feature up the top here with an elastic waist, and then it flows down into like a multi-section bottom area with some front feature splits. I feel like it's just such a trans-seasonal number. I can layer it up easily with like jumpers over the top, turtlenecks underneath, or I can just wear it as is in the warmer months. And you know we are all about a versatile number around here. Surprisingly, this is actually quite a simple number, and as always you can always adapt it to suit your style. So I've got it currently as like a midi length. You could quite easily take it up for a mini length or anything else in between. You could even stop at this first section and make a top, which in itself would be cute, or even you could take inspiration for the bottom section and make it just a skirt. So many options with this wardrobe essentials, so if you want to follow along in making this number, this is what you'll need to get started. First off, we'll obviously need some material. In the description area of this video I will put the suggested amounts per size based on this midi length, and I would suggest when you're looking for material, probably something nice and lightweight. This one is a linen gingham which I got from the fabric store, so anything probably like light and flowy. And if you're like me and you find that it is a little bit too transparent, you can add some lining, which I ended up doing. Once you have got your material, you'll then need some matching thread to go with that material, some pins, a safety pin, enough elastic to go around your waist area, plus a bit of extra seam allowance. My elastic was about 1/2 inch width. You'll then also need some fabric scissors and some fabric chalk and your trusty old sewing machine, and you'll be ready to make your own beautiful dress. But before we jump into the steps of bringing this dress to life, I would like to say a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, which happens to be Native. And if you have watched my videos, I have partnered with them before and gladly partnering with them today because honestly I haven't stopped using their products since I first got them.
Personally, I love having a couple of varying scents that I can switch up using, like the pop of fresh cucumber and mint for when I'm working out, the lavender and rose for my everyday outings, and the coconut and vanilla for those special occasions. Alongside these beautiful scents, the thing that keeps bringing me back to use Native is the fact that they're aluminium, paraben, and sulfate free, as well as the fact they are vegan and cruelty free. Plus they use simple ingredients that we all know, like coconut oil and shea butter, and unlike other clean deodorants, I find that this one is non-sticky and dries quickly, which is obviously great for a big day out or after a big workout. And Native also do amazing body washes and toothpaste, so you can treat your whole body to clean and safe products. So 3 deodorants are normally $36, but if you use my link and code, which you can find in the description box of this video, you'll get them for $24, and that's 33% off. With my code you can also get 20% off any body wash or toothpaste. Rightio, let's get into creating this dreamy dress. We'll be focusing on the top section first, so measure your full bust area and then times this by 1.5, and that will just allow us to get it to an oversized fit, which will then gather up for the drawstring effect. Once you have that full width times 1.5, then divide that in half, and that is going to be the cutting width for one of the back panels. So keep that in mind, and then we need to find the height of this panel, so measure from your mid chest down to about your waist area, or where you ideally would like this top section to finish. And then we'll be adding 4 inches for seam allowance, and that extra amount is just so that we can add in the drawstring and elastic waist sections. Once you have these 2 key measurements, let's cut out the first piece, which is this width and height that we just discovered, and that will be our back panel all done. And for the front side we need 2 panels because they're going to be separated in the middle. So what I did was just folded this first piece, placed it on my extra piece of fabric, making sure to offset it by at least 1 inch, so that can be some extra seam allowance to join it in the center, and then trim that first piece, then use that as a template to cut the second piece, and then now I should have 1 large back piece and 2 smaller front pieces. Next we need to start assembling these pieces, so let's focus on the front first and face them good sides facing. Obviously with this linen you can't really see a good and bad side, and then we will just sew down the one shorter edge that we want to be the center seam. I'm actually going to stop about 3 inches from the top, and that will be our area that the drawstring section comes out of. You can mark this section with a pin or even with some fabric chalk, and then we'll sew that one single line. Now that has joined to create a larger panel which matches the back side. We will then lay them good sides facing, and again we're going to do the same thing where we sew up those shorter side edges and stop from the top end to allow a separation for the armpit area. Although on my screen it shows about 5 inches, I ended up making mine about 7 inches down, as I wanted to allow more room for my arms and for it to separate. This is down to personal preference. Just keep in mind there is going to be about 2 inches taken up by the drawstring sections, so if you're unsure you can just go with the 7 inches like me, and then you can always adapt it later by unpicking sections to make it longer or sewing up and making it shorter. So once you have figured that out, again use a pin to mark the placement, sew up to that point and then stop and repeat on the other side. I then just flatten that center seam section and then also zigzag stitch those raw edges. So obviously if you have an overlocker, you can use that there. And the top section where the split is and it is folded back, I then just use this to create a hem section. Sew down one edge across the seam and then back up the other edge. And I repeated that on all of those splits that we have created. Next up, we need to focus on preparing the tie strap or drawstring sections. For the cutting width, I just went with about 2 inches as I find that will end up becoming a nice kind of smaller width. And then for the length, it needs to be quite long and it needs to go all around your back section, over your shoulders, and then meet at the front center. Once you have measured across your back, over your shoulders, and then across the front section, I would suggest to probably at least double this or add quite a generous amount to then give it enough extra length to then create that tie section at the front. For me, I actually didn't have one piece that was long enough for this, so that I ended up cutting out 2 pieces, joining them at the short edges with the good sides facing, and then that helped create an extra long piece. And then just laid it down good sides facing, sewed down one short edge and down the entire long side, and then left the other short end open. And then just did the method where I used the paintbrush, place this on the closed end and push this so that it helps reveal the good ends. Obviously it is a very long strap, so this paintbrush kind of did get lost in there and it did take a little bit longer than normally. Once I got to the other end, I just kind of shaped the paintbrush until it came out, and if you're following along you will notice that there is a raw edge left open now, so I just folded those good sides inwards and then just sewed one line across there, and that will help stop that from unraveling on that end. Next, we need to create some tunnels that are large enough for this strap to go into. So along these top edges I just created one fold about 1/2 inch and then created a second fold which was then big enough for my strap to go into. I just double checked this by actually just laying my strap on top. Once I was happy with that, I sewed straight across there and repeated this process for the shorter front edges, and then popped a safety pin on the edge of my strap. And ideally I just would have entered in one of the front sections, but obviously I like to make my life hard, so I entered it through the back section, across that gap into one of the front sections, then took the pin off and popped it on the other end to then place it through the other front section, because ideally we want the 2 ends of the straps to meet at the front so that we can create a cute little tie effect. You can then just gather up all of these sections until the point that you're happy with. You can even try it on here and tie a little knot, or just leave it be and focus on that at the end. We're essentially just going to do the same thing again but on the bottom section, but instead we'll be adding elastic in this section. So again, do a single smaller fold about 1/2 inch and then do a larger second fold for the hem to help create a tunnel for the elastic, making sure of course that it actually fits your elastic in there. Pin this in place and then sew entirely around this bottom section, making sure to stop about 2 inches from where you started, leaving a cute little gap that we can put our elastic into. Make sure at this point you have the elastic trimmed to your waist size plus about 1 to 2 inches for extra overlapping allowance. Then pop a pin on one end, guide it through that hole that we left open, and keep gathering and bunching up around until you reach that same point where you can exit. Then overlap that amount of seam allowance that you allowed, sew them so that they are secure. I normally switch my machine to a zigzag stitch for this step, then pull that through so it is all hidden within that tunnel area, then switch your machine back to a normal stitch and sew closed that little hole that we left open. Okie dokie, for this bottom section we are pretty much creating a skirt and then just adding it onto the top, and rather than just creating some random square sections and it being a bit, I don't know, bland, I kind of want it to have a bit more of a flare and flow out. So what I end up doing is finding my widest section of like my lower body where this skirt section will be sitting. For me that was about 40. I then added 8 inches, and that is just helping add a bit more of an extra flow so it's not tight around there. I then divide this by 6, and I'm going to do this because instead of just having a front and back panel, I'm going to have 6 smaller panels that end up creating this flared skirt section. I'm then going to add 4 inches as that will be my extra seam allowance that I will need to add for each panel. So just to repeat that, find your widest point, add 8 inches, divide this number by 6, then add 4 inches. So once you have found that width, write it down so you don't lose that number. We then need to find the cutting height, and we just do that by measuring down from our waist to where we would like this dress to finish. With those key measurements, we are then going to plot out some squares which we are going to add angles onto. So measure your width and your height, and then pick which side you want to be the top end, and we're going to measure in 1.5 inches and pop a dot there. Do this on both top sides, and then from this dot down to the bottom corner of our rectangle we will draw an angled line, and that will be our cutting angle. So there'll be a shorter top edge, a wider bottom edge and then an angle on each side. Then just trim this first piece, and I just went along and used this as a template moving forward rather than having to draw out all these points each time. So cut out around it and did that for all of my 6 panels that I needed, and then it is time to start assembling it. So grab 2 pieces, we will then face them good sides facing, and we're just going to focus on the back edges first and just sew entirely down the length of one side, then lay the next panel good sides facing on either edge and again sew entirely down, and that should be our 3 panels all joined together. Then we'll focus on the front 3 panels, face the good sides facing for 2 matching panels, figure out how far you would like this front split to come up to. So for me, I think mine comes up to about my knee area, so I just marked a point at where that will approximately be. I then sewed from the top edge down to this point that will then be the start of the split, the rest of the bottom section all open. The only thing is when we do these front seams which have the split, we just need to make sure that we have a larger seam allowance so that we can end up creating some hems around these splits. So I would suggest at least having 1/2 inch seam allowance, as that should be plain enough to allow us to fold it later on. And then repeated this, so you just grab that third piece and add it onto one of the pieces good sides facing, sew down into that point where the split starts, and that means you should have your 3 front panels all joined together, and then we can just add the back section onto that. So all we do is just lay that good sides facing and sew entirely down those 2 edges. I then just went around and zigzag stitch all my raw edges and ironed flat all these seams. Then to add the bottom section to the top, I laid the skirt section so all the good sides were facing out. I flipped the top section so it was inside out, because we have the front split section on the skirt and we have the front tie section on the top. When I slipped the top over the skirt, I made sure that the front bits were all aligning, and then pinned some key places, which were just like the side seams, the back middle section and the front middle section, and I knew that I could stretch it out and add any extra pins in there. Obviously there probably is a bit of a difference in width, so you will probably need to stretch and gather up any sections as you sew. Then just pop it on the machine, sew around this entire width, and that is your skirt and top joined together. If you're like me and it's quite see-through, this is also where I added the lining in. I was lucky enough just to have some extra material laying around from another dress that I just cut off and added underneath here. Or you could just do the same method of creating the 6 panels, but only down to wherever you would like your lining to go to, and just add it in this same method where you just join it along this seam area. And then finally we are up to the last step of finishing this garment. All we need to do is just hem all the bottom remaining edges, so do a double fold around those split sections, pin them in place, then do the same thing and create a double fold along the bottom section. You can see mine is quite a large hem. That is just because I figured out to get it to my ideal length I needed to create a larger hem, so that might be a good point just to try it on and figure out if you also need to take up any extra length to get it to where you would like it to sit. Then just simply go around all these edges, sew a single line, securing these hems in place, and that, my friends, is your new dress all done and ready to go. And of course just make sure that you go around and overlock or zigzag stitch or just clean up any raw remaining edges.
Well, if you did follow along, I hope that all made sense, and I hope you enjoyed bringing this garment to life. I think it's such a beautiful staple to have in any wardrobe. If you did give this tutorial a go and you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and also tag me at the Essentials Club on Instagram, as I always love seeing your outcomes. Well, it is time to add this baby to my wardrobe and style it up for whatever occasion or season I end up wearing it in. Again, don't forget to check out the sponsor of today's video, which is Native. Could not recommend them enough. All the details of the offer are below in the description box. Jump on board, love them. I'm sure you guys will love them as well. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys in the upcoming videos.